Did the ancient Maya have a World Cup? No competition of nations gathered on a marked field to lift a golden trophy. That idea belonged to a future they would never see. But long before any such gathering was imagined, in the stone cities of the jungle, rival kingdoms sent their finest men to face one another in a game older than almost any sport still played on Earth. A game where the ball was the sun, the court was a doorway between worlds, and the outcome mattered far beyond the score. To understand what the Maya truly had, the journey begins at the edge of a limestone court in the hours before the match. The classic Maya world stretched across what is now southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador. From roughly 250 to 900 in the Common Era, cities of stone rose from the rainforest Tikal, Palenque, Copan, and dozens more, each ruled by its own king, each in constant conversation, alliance, and rivalry with its neighbors. The Maya were astronomers who tracked the movements of Venus with a precision that took later science centuries to match. They were mathematicians who understood the concept of zero. They were storytellers who carved the memory of their kings into limestone stairways, and at the heart of nearly every great city, placed among the temples, the royal palaces, and the plazas, stood a ball court. More than 1,300 ball courts have been identified across the region. At Chichen Itza alone, archaeologists have found 13. The game they hosted was called pitz, and to understand what it meant, step onto the court itself. The court is shaped like the letter I, a long, narrow alley of packed earth or stucco, bordered on either side by parallel stone walls. Some walls slope inward, others rise vertically. The walls of the great ball court at Chichen Itza stand roughly 8 meters high and stretch 168 meters end to end. It is the largest ball court ever built in the ancient Americas. Its acoustics are so unusual that a voice at one end can be heard clearly at the other, more than 100 meters away. Whether this was intended or accidental, the effect is documented. On match day, that whisper of stone would have carried the sound of the crowd. The ball comes onto the court in the hands of an attendant. It is solid rubber, tapped from the sap of the Castilla elastica tree, a tree the Maya knew intimately. It weighs somewhere between 3 and 4 kilograms, dense enough at speed to break a rib. The players enter wrapped in gear, a thick padded belt. The yoke wraps around the waist to protect the hips and internal organs. Additional padding covers the knees, the elbows, and the forearms. A stuffed headdress cushions the skull. Some players wear stone ornaments called hachas fixed to the front of the belt, though scholars debate whether the heaviest of these were worn in play or displayed only as ceremonial regalia and trophies. Then the ball is put in motion, and here the rules become sharp. The ball may be struck with the hip, with the forearm, with the upper body, the elbow, the knee. It may never be touched with the hand. It may never be touched with the foot. To let it come to rest on the ground is to lose the point. The scoring itself varied by city and era. Points were earned when the opposing team failed to return the ball, when it crossed forbidden lines, or when it struck a specific carved marker. At Copan, those markers were sculpted as the heads of scarlet macaws, the bird the Maya associated with the sun. In later centuries, at courts like Chichen Itza, high stone rings were mounted 6 to 8 meters up the walls, so far above the players, so small a target, that to drive the ball through even once may have ended the game outright. Scholars still debate whether that shot was expected, or whether, when it happened, it was something close to a miracle. But pitz was never only a contest of hips and rubber. The Maya used the game as a stand-in for war. When two city-states quarreled over land, over tribute, over a broken alliance between royal houses, the dispute could be settled on the court. Rival kings sent their best players, sometimes played themselves, and the outcome carried the weight of an army. Painted murals around the courts show captives, warriors, and the transfer of political power from one ruler to another. At Copan, in Honduras, the Great Court was completed on the 10th of January in the year 738, commissioned by the 13th ruler of the city, a king whose name is often rendered in English as 18 Rabbit. Only months later, that same king was captured by the rival kingdom of Quirigua and beheaded. The court he built to celebrate the game outlived him. And here, the shadow enters. Some games ended in sacrifice. The carved stone panels at the base of the Great Ball Court at Chichen Itza show it directly. A kneeling player, his neck opened, streams of blood, transforming into serpents that curl into a flowering vine. Who was sacrificed? And how often is one of the most argued questions in Maya scholarship. One tradition, drawn from the images at Chichen Itza, holds that the losing captain paid with his head. Another tradition, drawn from the sacred text called the Popol Vuh, suggests that being sacrificed after a great match was the highest of honors, a passage into the world of the gods reserved for the winner. Modern scholars argue that ordinary ball players were most likely not routinely killed. The strongest evidence for sacrifice concerns war captives, enemy warriors taken alive in battle, then forced to play in ceremonial games whose outcome was decided before the ball was ever thrown. What is certain is this. On some occasions, in some cities, at some moments in the long history of the game, blood was shed on the court. And when it was not seen as murder. It was seen as an offering. The Maya believed the sun rose each morning because something was given for it. The game was one of the ways they gave. To understand why they gave, return to the ball. The Maya believed the rubber sphere in flight was the sun in motion, arcing across the sky, descending into the underworld at dusk, climbing back at dawn. The court itself was a passage between worlds. Its long alley was the corridor down which the sun traveled at sunset and up which it climbed at sunrise. To play was to reenact the movement of the cosmos. At the heart of this belief lay the story preserved in the Popol Vuh, the sacred book of the Quiche Maya, first written down in the 16th century from far older oral tradition. In that story, two brothers named Hunahpu and Espalanque, the hero twins, are called down into Xibalba, the underworld, to play the ball game against the lords of death. Their father had played before them and been killed. They walk in knowing the same fate may wait for them. Through cunning and courage, they endure the trials of the underworld. They play. They lose. They play again. They die. They return. And in the final match, they defeat the lords of death. Their words to the underworld, preserved in the Popol Vuh, are quiet and final. Hearken, all you of Xibalba, for never again will you or your posterity be great. Then the twins rise. The text says they arose straight into the sky. One of them arose as the sun and the other as the moon. Every game of pitz in every city, in every century, carried an echo of that first cosmic contest. The players on the court were not merely athletes. In the deepest sense the Maya could give them, they were stand-ins for the twins. The ball was the sun their ancestors had won from death, and each time it stayed in play, each time it did not touch the ground, the Maya believed the world was renewed. So did the ancient Maya have a World Cup? No. What they had was older and stranger and heavier. A game played on stone with a ball of rubber in courts that stood at the center of their cities and their cosmos. A game where cities faced each other, where kings measured themselves against kings, and where sometimes the fate of the sun itself was believed to hang in the balance. The final was never a trophy lifted. It was the sun rising the next morning. You've been watching KEMET Chronicles.